Hey guys, tonight we are drifting into the fuzzy, forgotten corners of your laundry room and the even dustier annals of history, to trace the surprisingly long and sleepy saga of Lint itself. You're pulling a warm, fresh t-shirt from the dryer right now, absently peeling that familiar mat of soft, gray fuzz from the trap. It's a mindless ritual, a tiny chore before the comfort of clean clothes. You ball it up, maybe flick it toward a trash can, and think nothing of it. That little wad of nothing is the end of a story thousands of years old, a tale of survival, innovation, and the relentless, crumbling decay of everything we touch. It's the ghost of fabric's past, and you are its constant, unwitting archaeologist. You probably won't survive this story, not because it's thrilling, but because it's designed to gently escort you into the deepest of sleeps. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you're down there in the comments, feel free to post your location and your local time. It is always fascinating to see where in the world we ray collectively deciding to power down for the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. To understand Lint, you have to go back before dryers, before washing machines, before even the concept of laundry itself. You have to go back to a world of raw, untreated hide and shaggy fur. Imagine yourself not in your cozy bed, but crouched in the mouth of a limestone cave, somewhere in the Paleolithic era. A fire sputters, casting long, dancing shadows on the wall. You're cold. The mammoth skin wrap draped over your shoulders is stiff, smelly, and currently shedding coarse, dark hairs all over your arms with every slight movement. You scratch your chest absently, and your fingers come away with a few of these proto-lint strands. This is the absolute genesis of the phenomenon. Simple shedding. The first textiles were just processed animal skins, and they were never not molting. Every step our ancestors took was likely accompanied by a gentle snow of biological debris, a tiny, personal weather system of fur and dander. You wouldn't have even noticed it. It was just part of the environment, like dust motes in a sunbeam. Your main concern was the chill, the damp, the gnawing in your stomach, not the tiny fibers detaching from your rudimentary clothing. But this was the first chapter. The great shedding. Then, a revolution, so slow it would be imperceptible across generations, the discovery of plant fibers. Picture yourself on the banks of a slow-moving river, somewhere in the Neolithic period. You're not a tailor. You're just trying to make something that doesn't actively smell like a dead animal. You're twisting strands of flax, soaked and beaten until they're pliable, into a crude cord. As you work, your hands become covered in tiny, irritating splinters and fluffy bits of the plant's bast fibers. This is the vegetable version of our furry lint. You blow on your hands, sending a cloud of this plant dust into the air. It's a nuisance, but it's a sign of progress. You're creating the world's first twisted threads, and with them, the world's first plant-based lint. Historians still argue whether the development of woven textiles was driven more by a desire for comfort, for status, or simply by the accidental discovery that twisted fibers are incredibly strong and useful for things like fishing nets and snares. Whatever the reason, the moment that first rough woven flax cloth was draped over a shoulder, it began its slow, inevitable process of disintegration. Every movement was a tiny abrasion, a microscopic event that sent little fibrils into the world. Now for a quirkier, more fringed tidbit from the deep past. While we imagine our ancestors in coarse, scratchy tunics, there's evidence some might have been fluffier than we think. Some experimental archaeologists, those delightful people who spend their weekends trying to make Iron-Age cheese, have proposed that certain ancient peoples might have used a technique called nap raising on their wool garments. This isn't the complex mechanical process we have today. It's far simpler. You'd take a finished wool cloth and just rub it, for a long, long time, with a handful of dried teasel heads or a spiny thistle. You'd brush and brush the surface, teasing out the ends of the wool fibers, making the fabric thicker, softer, and significantly warmer. It was the Stone Age equivalent of putting a sweatshirt through the fluff cycle. But the side effect, of course, was monumental lint generation. A freshly napped tunic would have been a lint factory, shedding little woolly clouds with every sit, stand, and stretch. You'd have been warmer, yes, but you'd also have been a walking haze of fuzz, leaving a soft, gray trail everywhere you went. A human caterpillar in a cocoon of your own making. It's a strangely comforting image, isn't it? Everyone just a little bit fuzzy, a little bit softer around the edges. So here you are, millennia later, performing the same basic ritual. You peel that mat from the dryer's filter, a compacted history of your week. That gray fuzz is a homogeneous blend of cotton from your socks, polyester from your gym shirt, a strand of wool from that old blanket, maybe even a pet hair or two. It's democracy in its most boring form, everything reduced to a common, fuzzy denominator. But for our cave-dwelling ancestor, or our flax-spinning Neolithic farmer, lint wasn't a uniform gray, it was a record. It was a tuft of brown bear fur stuck to a thorn, a few strands of prized dyed wool from a chieftain's cloak found on a common path, a bit of rare linen in a wool processing area, telling a story of trade or theft. It was evidence, it was the ephemeral, discarded signature of life, constantly being created and just as constantly being swept away by the wind, trod into the dirt, or dissolved by the rain. It was the world's most boring, most ubiquitous forensics, and nobody was there to read it. They just felt the itch, brushed the stray fiber from their arm, and went on with the hard work of surviving another day, utterly unaware they were participating in the ancient, endless production of the smallest, softest relics. You've seen the first episode of the series. Now let's go back in time again. From the golden age of Greece, the olives have ripened, fattening on the gnarled branches of trees that have watched empires rise and fall. You stand among thousands of pickers, each plucking the fruit with practiced ease, their baskets soon laden with the glistening orbs. Soon, the ground beneath your feet will be littered with olive pits, the size of your thumb and smooth as polished bone. You don't notice the tiny lint balls that form in the creases of your tunic, nor do the pickers care about the dust clinging to their skin. They are focused on the olives. But when their workday ends and they head for home, you notice something strange. Each picker has left a small pile of lint balls behind. It looks almost as though someone has taken a pair of combs and vigorously scratched their surface, leaving behind only the fluffiest bits of their garments. You kick a ball across the dirt road. It bounces once and comes to rest against a white wall. And when you lean close, you see why. The wall is covered in lint, a blanket of gray fuzz, worn smooth by countless footsteps and bleached almost white by the relentless sun. The fabric of the house itself seems to be unraveling, thread by thread. These linty walls are all around the Acropolis, a stark backdrop to the ancient Greek city's bustling life. Inside the houses, the wealthy might sit on couches draped in finely woven wool, while outside, the poor live cheek to cheek with their goats and sheep, scraping together a living. Everyone sheds. Everyone produces lint. The wealthiest citizens wear garments made of imported linen from Egypt and flax from the north, along with wool from local sheep. Their robes are expertly dyed purple, red, or saffron yellow. But even such fine fabrics show the wear and tear of daily life. The goddess Athena, patron of Athens, is said to have spun her own linen cloth. A skilled craftswoman, she chose flax as her medium, a plant that grew abundantly in Greece, perfect for the climate and easy to harvest. Flax was a staple of Greek dress, especially for women, and thus the tools and methods of its cultivation and processing were often controlled by women as well. The scene, the spinner spinning and weaving her wares, is a common one in vase paintings, showing both the importance of textiles in daily life and the role women played in creating them. The rhythmic clatter of the loom and the endless stream of fresh linen may seem a world away from the gritty world of the olive groves, but it is not. The weaver sitting patiently by her loom, carefully winding threads, is surrounded by coils of rope, bits of wool and goat hair, and yes, a growing pile of lint. This is where the transition from scratchy, animal hide garments to elegant linens and wools took place, and as with any industrial process, there is a constant stream of waste. Sometimes lint plays its role in worship. In a rare moment of whimsy, the god Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, is shown wearing a crown of unspun flax. But more often than lint is a nuisance, an airborne irritant to the ancient Greeks. When Sappho writes of the unbearable itchiness of love, she also describes a physical ailment caused by lint, the katatekon, which clings to us invisible yet inescapable. In the ancient Greek world, where men gathered in the agora to discuss philosophy and trade goods, the humble olive pit wasn't the only thing flying through the air. There was also lint. Every cough, every gesture released more fuzz into the atmosphere, creating a hazy film that hung over the city. It's easy to imagine the air of ancient Greece as sparkling and pure, a world away from our smoggy present, but the streets of Athens were often filled with dust, smoke and body odor, a reality captured perfectly in the vase paintings that adorn them. The most visible evidence of everyday life, the only truly democratic form of art. They record the mundane details of daily life, including the grimy realities of everyday existence. On one vase, A woman in rags sweeps the floor of her house. Her thin arms strain under the weight of her broom. Outside, her children play near a heap of garbage, including a discarded shoe covered in patches and a furry old cloak, already starting to shed. Welcome to my channel. The big marble of Rome crumbles, its gutters choked not just with wool lint, but with the dust of an empire falling apart. The air clears of that particular Roman mixture of incense, sweat, and strigil wax, and it thickens into something darker, damper, and profoundly more scratchy. You are no longer a citizen in a toga. You are a pair of shoulders hunched under a perpetually damp sky in northern Europe, sometime deep in the so-called Dark Ages. The coarse, undyed wool of your tunic is your whole world. It's your blanket, your raincoat, your only change of clothes, and it is constantly, unendingly shedding. You are not just wearing wool. You are slowly dissolving into it, a human silhouette gradually blurring at the edges into a cloud of itchy, greasy fibers. Every movement is a small act of erosion, a tiny sacrifice of your garment to the world. You don't just generate lint, you live inside a personal biosphere of it. It's in your hair, it's under your fingernails, it's mixed with the straw in your bedding, and it's undoubtedly the primary ingredient in the questionable stew you ate for supper. In such an existence, objects don't so much gather dust as they do slowly succumb to a rain of greasy flakes, a ceaseless drizzle of fiber and flesh, the spittle of hawking travelers, the damp grime of unwashed children, even the dead skin of fish. All of it contributes to a haze that clings to everything. Your house, the road, the fields. Imagine a trip to the market in this world. Picture the scene, a bustling square filled with people in coarse, dark woolen clothing, their faces pale from a lack of sunlight. The air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, stale waste, and damp wool. The market stalls are piled high with simple goods, the same drab colors, wool, linen, leather, and straw. The sound of bartering fills the air. In this world, there is little to distinguish one person from another except for the subtle variations in the quality of their ragged clothing and the mud caked to their worn leather shoes. What links us to this world is the very stuff that we take for granted, the fabric of our clothing. That nondescript gray wool that makes up the bulk of our wardrobes has its roots here, the humble homespun tweed of peasants, herders, and monks, and it came to us via an astonishingly complex web of trade routes that spread throughout Europe and beyond. This world, however, is almost unknown to us. To understand what everyday life was like in the period known as the Dark Ages, a time often mistakenly associated with filth and ignorance, we have to learn to see through a haze of lint. We have to learn to read the history of an era by the accumulation of its most overlooked artifact, the ubiquitous presence of wool lint. Our modern conceptions of the past are littered with preconception stereotypes and misconceptions, especially when it comes to the Dark Ages, a term coined by 19th century historians to describe the period following the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It conjures images of ignorance, superstition, and a general lack of hygiene. But was this really the case? Let's start with an unpopular opinion. While most discussions of hygiene in the Dark Ages center around the absence of widespread bathing, perhaps a more telling aspect of daily life can be found in the ubiquitous presence of wool lint. To understand what everyday life was like during this period, we have to learn to see through a haze of fuzz. It is important to remember that the so-called Dark Ages wasn't just a time of upheaval and societal change. It was also a time of innovation, cultural development, and, yes, wool production. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe entered a period of significant transformation. Feudalism emerged as a dominant social system, replacing the hierarchical structure of the Roman Empire with a decentralized network of local lords and vassals. This shift led to profound changes in land ownership, labor systems, and political loyalties. During this time, Northern Europe experienced a significant cultural shift. The region, which had previously been part of the Roman Empire, was now largely cut off from the Mediterranean world and its cultural influences. This isolation fostered the growth of distinct regional cultures, leading to the emergence of what we today call Germanic peoples. These groups, including the Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, and the Lombards, developed their own languages, customs, and values, laying the groundwork for the cultural landscape of medieval Europe. At the heart of these societies was the institution of the monastery. Monasteries became the unexpected powerhouses of medieval lint production. Picture yourself within the cold, stone walls of a scriptorium. A monk, his breath misting in the chilly air, is meticulously copying a sacred text. He's wrapped in a thick, rough woolen habit. As his arm moves back and forth across the vellum, A gentle snow of gray and brown fibers drifts from his sleeve onto the page. He'll blow it away carefully later, but some will always remain, trapped forever in the wet ink. If you look at some surviving manuscripts under a microscope, you can find them, tiny, petrified time capsules of a monk's wardrobe, embedded in a letter of scripture. The monastery was a closed ecosystem, and its lint was an internally circulating problem. They weren't just producers of spiritual texts and beer. They were major agricultural centers, raising vast flocks of sheep. They sheared them, spun the wool, wove the cloth, and fashioned the habits a perfect, closed-loop system of scratchy, pious lint generation. The entire monastic life was set to the soft, silent soundtrack of wool fibers detaching and floating to the floor. But let's talk about the scriptorium. This room within the monastery was where monks painstakingly copied manuscripts, preserving ancient texts and creating new ones. The work was not just a means of safeguarding knowledge. It was a central practice in the religious life of a monastery. It was a long, meticulous process involving careful transcription and illumination, and it generated a surprising amount of lint. The rhythmic scraping of quills, the rustle of vellum pages, and the occasional sneeze all contributed to a fine mist of fibers suspended in the still air. Add to that the gentle shedding of the monk's woolen habits, and you have a recipe for a truly cozy cloud of lint. Monasteries were not just hives of intellectual activity. They were also significant producers of wool. Many monasteries had their own flocks of sheep, providing a steady supply of wool for the creation of warm, durable clothing suitable for the often harsh northern European climate. This wool, spun and woven by the monks themselves, would become the source of yet more lint, perpetuating a cycle of fiber shedding and preservation. If you've ever visited a historic site or museum, you've probably encountered display cases filled with old clothing or textiles. These artifacts, often shrouded in protective tissue or housed in acid-free containers, are designed to protect these fragile pieces of the past from further deterioration. But what many of these displays fail to account for is the lint factor. Each piece of preserved clothing, each scrap of woven fabric, is host to a universe of accumulated lint. These are tangible remnants of the lives of the people who once wore them, a silent testament to their daily activities and the passage of time. The lint embedded in these ancient textiles serves as a silent witness to the stories that unfolded during the Dark Ages. By understanding how prevalent lint was during this time period, we gain a deeper appreciation for the lives of the people who lived then. We realize that their experiences were not all that different from our own, and their struggles to maintain their appearance and personal hygiene in a scratchy, shedding-centric world are surprisingly relatable. Their clothing, now preserved in museums, becomes more than just historical artifacts. It transforms into a tangible link to the past, a physical manifestation of the daily challenges they faced, the jobs they performed, and the environments in which they lived. It reminds us that behind every piece of clothing is a story waiting to be uncovered, literally one lint ball at a time. In the grand tapestry of history, the Dark Ages may seem like a distant, almost foreign chapter. Yet the challenges faced by those who lived then resonate with us in ways we might not expect. Their struggle to maintain their appearance in a world dominated by scratchy, shedding clothing and the omnipresence of lint serve as a powerful reminder of the shared nature of the human experience. Each flake of wool that clings to a tunic or drapes over a manuscript speaks volumes about the lives, customs, and challenges of the people who lived during this era. And it's through these seemingly insignificant details that we truly connect with the past. So the next time you find yourself surrounded by the familiar comfort of your own clothing, take a moment to appreciate the silent echoes of the past. Recognize that your own experiences of shedding, lint, and the endless quest for a fresh, unbobbled sweater are part of a much larger narrative. You are part of a lineage of humans who have navigated the challenges of apparel, none of them quite like yours, but all of them wrestling with the same fundamental problems of durability, decency, and keeping the lint to yourself. The stuff we make this video out of. Today, my friends, we are off to the races, or perhaps more accurately, the spinning jennies, for our word of the day is fuzz, meaning here the soft, downy fibers found on fruits and vegetables, textile materials, etc., that unwanted, sometimes even unmentionable byproduct of the good life. Oh, look at you, looking that word up in the dictionary. I know you think you're better than that, but it's an important word today, a word you should keep nearby as we do our best to understand the evolution of one of humanity's great ongoing struggles, man versus fuzz. It's me. Welcome to this channel, where we try to answer the great question, why do we do the things we do? Or more to the point, why do we put up with them? Take For example, fuzz of the vegetable variety. Nothing more annoying than reaching for that perfect pear only to find your fingers smeared with downy peach fuzz, or harvesting your prized tomatoes only to discover your hands are sticky with a thin layer of fine hairs. Humans have been wrestling with this problem since we first encountered fuzzy produce, going so far as to breed smooth varieties of fruits like peaches and cucumbers to avoid the need to remove a protective, inedible coating. But we humans aren't alone in our struggle, for fuzz is a common strategy in nature. It's not merely the sign of a ripe avocado, but also a sign of a plant or fruit's defense mechanism. Those hairs on your cucumber aren't just there for your convenience. They're there to help the plant survive. They deter insects and animals who don't like crawling through a field of prickly pear. They collect pollen, helping with fertilization, and they can even regulate temperature or protect fragile fruit. But we humans don't care much for such pedestrian concerns. We want our fruit bare, easy to handle, ready to eat. And so we've invented tools, starting with the humble fingernail and progressing to razors and specially designed brushes. One of the earliest written records of an English garden includes a list of implements necessary to properly cultivate and harvest the crops, including razors, those primarily used for shaving, but here pressed into service to achieve a fuzz-free tomato. For centuries, we dealt with the fallout of fuzz largely on an individual level. That is until the advent of the Industrial Revolution and its many machines. Large-scale innovations like the Ginny and the power loom that forever altered the relationship between man and fuzz. That pervasive, scratchy fog of the Middle Ages begins to stir, agitated by a new, relentless rhythm. The soft, constant decay of hand-spun wool and rough linen is about to be violently accelerated. The gentle, almost organic shedding of fibers is replaced by the shriek of metal on metal. The thunderous percussive beat of machinery that doesn't just create cloth but devours it, and vomits out its particulate ghost on an unimaginable scale. You are no longer in a quiet monastic scriptorium or a smoky peasant hut. You are standing at the threshold of the satanic mills, and the air itself has turned against you. It's thick, humid, and visible, a swirling storm of cotton dust that catches what little light filters through the grime-caked windows. You can taste it on your tongue, a sweet, fuzzy, and ultimately suffocating flavor that is the very taste of progress. This is the Industrial Revolution, and it has declared total war on clean air and clear lungs, all in the name of producing more cloth faster than ever before. And with more cloth comes exponentially more waste, more fuzz, more lint. Our mainstream historical fact here is the mechanization of destruction. The spinning jenny, the water frame, the power loom. These weren't just machines that made thread and cloth. They were machines designed to subject fibers to unprecedented levels of stress, friction, and abrasion. Picture yourself in a cotton mill in Lancashire, England. The noise is a physical force, a wall of sound that vibrates through the wooden floorboards and into your bones. Dozens of power looms clatter and slam, their shuttles flying back and forth in a blur. And with every violent pass, every jarring impact, they don't just weave cloth, they blast a mist of tiny cotton fibrils into the air. The looms are surrounded by a permanent, choking haze. You, a child worker tasked with crawling under the active machinery to clear jam-ups, or sweep the accumulating drifts of fluff, are breathing in a concentrated cloud of what they called kiss me quick, a deceptively charming name for the airborne lint that would over time fill your lungs with a dense, inescapable fibrosis known as bisonosis. The grimly nicknamed brown lung. You weren't just making fabric, you were manufacturing an occupational disease, one fluffy particle at a time. Now for a quirkier, more domestic tidbit from this era of explosive fuzz. As the mills churned out cheap, abundant cloth for the masses, the home front faced its own lint crisis. The Victorian home was a temple of stuff, draped in velvets, festooned with tassels, and upholstered in every fabric imaginable, and all of it was shedding. This created a new domestic nuisance of epic proportions, leading to the invention of some truly bizarre contraptions. Before the modern lint roller, there was the velvet pad. This was a small, handheld block covered in, you guessed it, velvet, which was brushed over clothing to attract and lift lint through static electricity. Even more peculiar was the gutta-percha rubber lint remover, a sticky, malleable blob of natural rubber that you knead and dab across your best waistcoat to pick up every stray bit of fuzz. It was less a tool and more a pet, a strange, sticky companion in the endless battle against a dust-filled world. The wealthiest Victorians might even have a dedicated lint servant, a lower housemaid, whose specific mind-numbing task was to carefully brush and pick the lint from the family's dark formal attire, each morning a human version of the modern dryer sheet. Historians still argue whether the dramatic drop in the price of textiles during the Industrial Revolution led to a net increase or decrease in lint production per capita. On one hand, everyone now had more clothes, which meant more things to shed. A middle-class Victorian family's wardrobe was a significant lint factory. On the other hand, these new industrially woven fabrics, especially the early synthetics and tightly spun cottons, were often more durable and shed less proportionally than the coarse, hand-spun wools and linens of the past. So, did the massive volume of new cloth outweigh its slightly improved durability? Was the Victorian world actually fuzzier than the medieval one, or did it just feel that way because all that lint was now accumulating on dark formal furniture in well-lit parlors, making it more visible and therefore more offensive to the sensibilities of the new middle class? The debate rages on in academic journals, a quiet, polite war fought over percentages of particulate matter. So you, the Victorian gentleman or lady, are living in the golden age of visible filth. Your home is a plush, overstuffed trap for airborne fibers. You rise from your horsehair sofa and leave a ghostly impression of yourself behind in a cloud of dust. You pat the family dog, a shedding Newfoundland, and become a walking tapestry of pet hair. You enter your factory, your office, or even just walk down a soot-choked street, and you accumulate the lint of the entire city. Your life is a constant battle against this encroaching fuzz, fought with bizarre rubber blobs and dedicated servants. And when you finally retire to your bedroom, you breathe in the faint, dusty scent of your own existence, the shed skin cells, the cotton from your sheets, the wool from your blankets, all of it swirling in the dim gaslight. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how things were made, it changed the very air you breathed, transforming it from a simple life-giving element into a complex, polluted soup. With lint as its most humble, yet most pervasive, ingredient, it was the price of progress, paid in an endless, soft, gray snowfall that settled on every surface. A constant reminder that everything was, always, falling apart. As someone once said, clothes make the man, or more likely, lingerie ruin the air. The point being that we live in a world obsessed with the way we look, with projecting a certain image, even if it's slowly killing us. You know, in another century or two, when all our lungs are ground to dust, the world will remember us by the lint we left behind. I hope you enjoyed this episode of a series where we talk about words and stories. If you did, why not check out our podcast, available on various platforms? If you really want to know what makes us tick, then head on over to our support page. There's lots of fun stuff to explore, including deleted scenes, bonus podcasts, and the power to suggest future topics. Hit the bell icon to subscribe to our channel or follow us on social media to see more of the faces behind the fascinating words we talk about. I'll see you next time. It's easy to imagine how a space like this would function. In this space, everything has to be put into buckets. First, we're gonna take some space and we're going to create containers within that space. There are 3 different sizes, and they correspond to 3 different types of objects. The large bucket is for things that are small enough to fit inside of them and are either valuable or breakable. The middle bucket is for things that don't fit into the big bucket and aren't particularly fragile. And then the smallest bucket is for things that are extremely small and can be lost easily. So now let's add some objects into this space. We've got a giant squid, a harp, a car, a door. What do we do with these objects? Well, obviously the giant squid is too big for the biggest bucket, so we put it somewhere else. The harp, however, is small enough to fit inside the biggest bucket, so that's where it goes. The car is too big, so we move it, and then we try again. Oh, wait, we can split it up. Each half will fit into a bucket, so off it goes. We do the same with the door. We divide and conquer. Even though none of these objects can fit whole, we can chop them up until each part is small enough to be stored away. This is a great system. Everything has its place. Everything is accounted for. Nothing gets left behind. And even though nothing is complete, everything fits. Now, if you look around, you'll notice that there's nothing on the floor. There's nothing obstructing the space. And you might think, well, that's pretty obvious. You just put stuff in buckets until it all fits. Not exactly. The secret to keeping order in this space isn't about finding places for things. It's about removing things from places. See, when we first entered this space, it was completely empty. We didn't find any buckets. We brought them with us. They weren't here. And yet somehow everything still fit because there was nothing here to get in the way. All that stuff was already sorted. We just had to bring the boxes. The key to making a place like this work is to make sure that when you enter the space, you leave as little as possible inside of it. That's what it means for a place to be truly empty. It's not that there's nothing in it. It's that there's nothing left there by accident. Everything that's supposed to be there, we put there on purpose. And everything that's not supposed to be there, well, we remove it. This is a really simple idea, but it's important. So let me say it again. To make a place like this work, you need to be able to bring yourself to use a space without bringing anything into that space. How do we do that? Without getting more granular, the answer is always the same. By understanding our tools. Let's go back to our original space and remove the buckets. Here we go. Now, if we want to make sense of this jumble of objects, we're going to need to understand what these things are made of. A door is made of wood. A car is made of metal. A giant squid is made of flesh. A harp is made of metal and wood. When we understand the constituent parts of these objects, we realize that we can group them together. All of these things are made of flesh, metal, or wood, and this leads us to a useful distinction. Things made of flesh or metal are perishable. They won't last forever. Things made of wood are renewable. They can be sustained. Wood is everywhere in this space, and we can use it to build whatever structures we need to sort and contain the other materials. If we start putting things in buckets, we run into problems. The wood can't be contained because it's renewable. It won't stop coming. But if we containerize the space with wood, then we can take advantage of the natural properties of that material. It will keep growing, but it won't fill up our containers. It will keep filling up our space, but it won't keep growing. So now when we walk into this space, we're prepared for what we're going to find because we know what these things are made of, and we know how to contain that stuff. But that's still not enough. Just sorting things by material doesn't allow us to organize them. We need to account for their size. So we add another layer of granularity. Instead of just having a few containers for wood or metal, we have many, and each container corresponds to a different size of object. And now our space looks like this. The idea is the same. Everything has its place, but it's now much easier to find those places because things are grouped in more meaningful ways. Stuff made of wood that's small. Stuff made of wood that's medium. Stuff made of wood that's big. It's not perfect, but it's better than our unsorted space. There's one more step we can take to make this space totally useful. We haven't done anything with the walls yet. We haven't taken advantage of the two-dimensional surfaces that surround us. Walls are useful. They're rigid and flat and perpendicular to the floor, which makes them a good place to hang stuff. Let's take advantage of these surfaces and declutter the floor. Once we do that, our space is much more functional, but it's still not perfect. There's one more step we can take. We haven't done anything with the ceiling yet. It's a shame because it's a perfectly good surface to project stuff onto. When we project stuff onto the ceiling, we've now converted this space into a multi-dimensional landscape. Our vertical surfaces show us what S inside our containers and our ceiling tells us what S on the floor, and we have this information at a glance. And that's the real trick to designing a space like this. If you want to design a space that lets you juggle a bunch of balls in the air, you need to reduce the friction between the things in that space and the actions you want to take. Now, when we enter this space, we know exactly what to expect. We know what's happening here just by looking at it. It's clear, it's readable. We can navigate this space without disturbing it. We can come in and out of this space without leaving anything behind. And that's what it means for a space to be truly empty. It's not that there's nothing in it, it's that there's nothing left there by accident. And that's what this channel is like. It's a space that's designed to contain and organize information. But that information isn't just random. It comes from very specific sources and it follows very particular rules. That's what allows us to curate this space in such a way that anyone who enters it knows what to expect and can navigate it without getting lost. We can tell what each video is about just by looking at the thumbnail. We can predict what kind of information we're going to find in each video just by reading the title. And we can trust that each video will be coherent and consistent because they follow the same set of rules. You can support the work that we do on this channel through a platform that lets you support creators directly. As a thank you for your support, we've created a special badge you can display on your profile to show your fellow viewers that you're a patron of our work. In the deafening heart of the gun deck, amidst a maelstrom of gunpowder, sweat and human sinew, there's another sound you wouldn't expect. Someone has brought a kitten onto the ship. It's mewling. Plaintive cries cut through the thunderous roar of cannons. Why? Because someone has noticed that the sailors are missing a vital resource to help them cope with the chaos around them. Their ears. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? Bringing a cat on board to drown out the noise of battle. But let me tell you, the benefits of having a purring machine nearby. especially in times of stress, are real. Cats can reduce cortisol levels and lower blood pressure. They may even help alleviate some of the symptoms of ADHD. However, they won't reduce the risk of scurvy. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the curious ways that cats have affected human history, from the companionship of the ancient Egyptians to their role in keeping rodents away from our food supply. Cats have had a significant impact on our past. However, there is one crucial time period when their contributions went a little bit overlooked: the golden age of piracy. When you think of pirates, images probably spring to mind. Men with bandanas and parrots on their shoulders, pillaging ships and plundering treasure. You might also imagine a cat, lounging regally on the shoulder of Blackbeard himself, as he surveys his spoils. But did pirates actually keep cats as pets? Were their presence on pirate ships purely coincidental, or were they a deliberate choice? To answer that question, we need to look at the daily lives of pirates and understand the role that cats play in our society. Pirates were seafarers who lived and worked on ships, and their vessels were their homes as well as their means of making money. Much like any home, they needed to be kept clean and free of pests. Rodents such as rats and mice can carry diseases that can kill humans, not to mention they can eat food stores and damage supplies. Cats, with their innate ability to hunt small animals, were a perfect solution to this problem. Plus, the sailors themselves would have benefited from the comfort and companionship of a furry friend during months at sea. But while it makes sense that pirates would keep cats on their ships, the reality was far more complicated. See, piracy was illegal and dangerous, and pirates were constantly hiding from the authorities. If they were spotted, they could face imprisonment, exile, or even death. In these dire straits, every member of the crew counted. And if you're keeping track, that's two fewer spots in your cramped ship for a cat. Instead, each ship was filled to the brim with supplies, weapons, and booty, and squeezing a cat in would have been a challenge. Plus, cats need fresh water to drink and a steady source of food to eat. And finding that on a pirate ship can be tricky. Even if you could get past the limited space and resources, cats can be unpredictable. They can fight with the crew, chase birds off the mast, and generally cause chaos. That's the last thing a captain needs when trying to navigate storms, capture treasure, and outrun the navy. So why don't we see more accounts of cats on pirate ships? Well, it's simple. Cats are territorial and don't always get along with other felines. Introducing a new cat into a group of pirates could lead to fights, injuries, and even death. It's not worth the risk, especially when there are plenty of other ways to deal with rats. For example, some crews turned to dogs or kept their cabins immaculately clean to avoid attracting rodents. Others relied on a simple trick, tricking rats into thinking there are snakes on board. When they arrived at port, they could even leave the problem to the locals. Many port cities had laws requiring that ships be cleared of rodents before unloading cargo, so by the time a pirate ship arrived, it would have been thoroughly cleaned of vermin. There was no need to bring a cat on board. In fact, it could be downright dangerous. A stowaway cat could easily hide in barrels or among the cargo, only to emerge when the ship was already sailing the high seas. Not exactly convenient. And even if a cat did make it on board, it would have faced stiff competition for survival. Food was often scarce on pirate ships, and the crew had to ration their supplies carefully. There's no way they would have wasted their precious provisions on an animal and water. Well, it's a similar story. On long voyages, fresh water could be in short supply, and the crew would have to drink salty ocean water or rainwater. Pirates weren't exactly known for their generosity, and they wouldn't have shared their limited water supply with a cat. Not to mention the dangers of the sea. Storms, high waves, and rough waters can make it difficult for a cat to stay upright and safe. Imagine the scene. You're on a small boat. The waves are crashing around you, and suddenly a rogue wave hits, knocking you off your feet and sending you tumbling into the sea. A cat is not equipped to survive in such conditions and would likely drown or wash away into the vast ocean. It's just not worth the risk. Instead, many pirates kept their distance from cats, focusing on their mission to loot and plunder without any distractions. Some stories do exist of famous pirates like Blackbeard, who supposedly kept a cat named Midnight, but these tales are likely apocryphal. After all, the golden age of piracy occurred between the 1650s and the 1730s, and cats hadn't been domesticated until several centuries earlier. Plus, cats require regular grooming, and it's unlikely that a busy pirate would have had the time or inclination to brush a cat's fur. Instead, they would have preferred to focus on their mission at hand, stealing as much treasure as possible. So while it may be fun to imagine cats stalking prey on pirate ships, The reality was far more mundane. The presence of cats on pirate ships was likely minimal, and their impact on pirate history, negligible. Pirates preferred to leave cats on land where they belonged, focusing instead on their pursuit of riches and adventure on the high seas. So the next time you hear a swashbuckling tale of a fearsome pirate, don't picture a cat lounging on the shoulder of a buccaneer. Cats may be skilled hunters and excellent companions, but they're not the stuff of legends, at least not when it comes to pirates. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more fun and educational content. And remember, if you ever find yourself on a pirate ship, leave your cat at home. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about lint. So many of you have written to me about this. What is lint? Why does it collect on my clothing? Why does it build up in my pockets? Well, today we are going to answer those questions once and for all. Let's go back to the beginning. Back to the time when lint was both a lot more gruesome and actually did have some use. Imagine yourself in a crowded, dimly lit operating room. The scent of carbolic acid hangs heavy in the air, mixing with the coppery odor of blood and the cloying sweetness of decay. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find beauty, but here it is, falling away from the body like autumn leaves, only instead of crisp red and gold, it's a stark, unsettling white. It's everywhere, clinging to instruments, draping the floor, swirling in the faint drafts. Most surprisingly of all, floating around in thick, lazy clumps, obscuring the field of vision, making the surgeon's task even more difficult. This strange, disconcerting landscape is one of decay, yes, but also creation. For every bit of flesh removed, every stitch made, there is a matching amount of lint deposited, a strange byproduct of the life and death struggle taking place on the table below. As the surgeon works, a small crowd gathers, not of onlookers, but workers, each with a small brush or cloth in hand, constantly sweeping, dabbing and collecting the ever-falling snow. They work not because they must, but because they can, turning an unwelcome consequence into a useful resource. This is the domain of the powder monkey, an old-timey term for the low-ranking assistant who scurries around the ship, gathering and distributing supplies. Their most important tool isn't a scalpel or a musket, but a small handheld brush. It's their job to brush lint off everything, everyone and anything. Brushes are a central part of this process, but the story of lint goes back further than that. In fact, it goes back to the beginnings of clothing itself. We might think of clothes as simple things, easy to come by, easy to wear, but they represent a huge investment of labor, skill, and sometimes capital. Take a t-shirt. Making one involves a complicated global network of farmers, textile factories, sewing sweatshops, marketing agencies, and retailers. Cheap ones can be found almost anywhere, but for most of history, that wasn't the case. Clothes were expensive, both in terms of money and effort. Given that investment, it's not surprising that people wanted to take good care of them, that they wanted to clean them and repair them and reuse them as much as possible. Early humans rubbed animal hides on flat stones to smooth them and remove hair, then pounded them on rocks to loosen dirt and debris. Later, ingenious laundresses used urine to clean fabric and vinegar as a disinfectant. With the advent of linen and wool, people began using wooden beating pans, essentially small hammers on sticks, to keep fabric from becoming too dirty or too stiff. By the Middle Ages, laundering clothes was a communal event, an elaborate ceremony involving dozens of women, hours of backbreaking labor, and a substantial investment of wood fuel. All of these efforts were geared towards one thing: removing lint. It wasn't called lint back then. It went by other names, like wear, nap, or wilted, but it was recognized as a distinct substance, something that accumulated on clothing and needed to be dealt with. Otherwise, it could ruin the fabric, make it too rigid to wear, or worse, catch fire. Fire was a constant danger in daily life, and clothes were the easiest thing to ignite. One small spark was all it took, so people grew accustomed to constantly brushing, combing and scraping their clothes, removing the fine hairs and loose threads that could so easily turn them into torches. This wasn't just a chore, it was an obsession. People developed whole systems of brushes and combs, each designed to deal with a particular type of fabric or purpose. Some were wide and stiff, like modern carpet sweepers, meant to be used before washing. Others were narrow and flexible, meant for finishing touches after washing. Despite these efforts, some lint always remained, adhering to the skin or clinging to folds in the fabric. It was impossible to get it all, and so the relationship between people and lint has always been uneasy. We created it, we collected it, and we wore it with a mix of pride and resignation. Until the Industrial Revolution, this was an acceptable state of affairs. Lint was simply a fact of life. You brushed it off and got on with things. The number of items in your wardrobe was limited, and you couldn't just throw things away. You darned and mended and reused. But starting in the late 18th century, all that changed. Machines started doing the work of humans, spinning, weaving and sewing faster and cheaper than any person ever could. Huge factories filled with clattering looms and shuttles churned out goods that could be bought by anyone, not just the wealthy. Clothes became cheap, plentiful and disposable. The rules of the game changed. No longer could we afford to be careless. Lint now posed a serious threat, not to our dignity, but to our homes. Fast forward to the present day. The life and death struggle over lint moves from the human body to the household appliance. The grim, pus-soaked realities of the surgical theater finally fade. The phantom smell of carbolic acid and decay replaced by something far more domestic and, frankly, underwhelming. The warm, humid air of a suburban laundry room. The battle rages on, but the stakes are lower. The enemy is a lot less immediate, and the weapons, well, they're just a lot more boring. You are no longer a patient or a powder monkey. You are a 20th century homeowner, and your new adversary is a whirring, tumbling, electrically heated metal drum that is, with every cycle, trying to burn your house down. The heroic, if horrifying, medical lint is gone. In its place is the mundane, fluffy villain of the modern age, dryer lint, and a new breed of hero is emerging to fight it, not the surgeon or the naval admiral, but the frustrated, pragmatic inventor in his garage, staring at his overheating dryer and wondering how to stop this madness. The invention of the automatic clothes dryer in the early 20th century solved one problem, the weather-dependent drudgery of line drying, but it created another, far more explosive one. These early machines were brutal. They tossed clothes in a metal drum blasted by electric or gas-heated air, creating a perfect storm of friction, heat, and highly flammable loose fibers. The result was a constant, high-volume production of lint that was mostly just blown out an exhaust vent, coating the side of the house and the backyard in a soft, gray snow. But a significant amount clung to the interior, clogging vents, reducing efficiency, and, most dangerously, clinging to the heating elements. It was a recipe for disaster. House fires caused by dryers became a common and terrifying headline. The solution wasn't immediately obvious. Someone had to look at this complex, dangerous machine and think, you know what this needs? A little mesh screen. The patents themselves, dry legal documents, don't reveal the motivation, only the solution. It's a debate that pits altruism against capitalism, a quiet conflict fought not on battlefields, but in boardrooms and suburban basements, with the humble lint trap as its unlikely trophy. So you, the mid-century homemaker, are the beneficiary of this quiet revolution. That simple act of pulling the warm, felt-like sheet of lint from the trap is a ritual of safety, a tiny exorcism of the fire demon from your appliance. It's a satisfying gesture, a small moment of visible accomplishment in a day full of invisible chores. You peel it off in one satisfying piece, a compact archaeological record of the last load, the blue from the jeans, the white from the towels, a stubborn red thread from that one sock. You might even idly roll it between your fingers before discarding it, feeling the unique, soft yet slightly abrasive texture of 100 different garments reduced to a single, homogeneous mass. It's a pointless little gesture, but it connects you to a long line of people dealing with this same substance. From the monastic scribe to the naval powder monkey to the battlefield surgeon, your battle is less dramatic, but the principle is the same. The relentless, ongoing management of entropy. You are maintaining order against the constant, fluffy tide of decay, ensuring that the machine that keeps your family clean and comfortable doesn't also become the instrument of its destruction. It's a small, boring act of domestic heroism, performed several times a week, forever. I am currently sitting in the middle of my entire wardrobe, specifically, a semi-arid dessert of 8 pounds of lint and dust bunnies. The air itself feels thick with dust mites and dog hair and the ghosts of 1,000 ill-conceived fashion choices. This is what remains after 3 years of clothing, countless loads of laundry, and one very aggressive filter cleaning have reduced me to this shapeless mass of nothing. A pyramid of lint bigger than my head, a tower of forgotten fibers. What is it? Where does it come from? And what the hell am I gonna do with it? The first question, what is this, is weirdly tricky. A load of laundry generates roughly 1/2 to 1 cup of lint per wash. By volume, this isn't anything particularly special. You can scoop it, it'll hold its shape, but it's incredibly light. In other words, it's the very definition of nothing. Given the approximate weight of a cup, a load of laundry generates about 1/4 to 1/2 pound of lint per wash. A respectable amount, enough that if you have any sort of semi-functional dryer, it's probably accumulated in your lint trap. It looks kind of like this, except way more flattened and possibly containing a handful of stray screws, dryer hoses, and the evil spirit of Mr. Bungle. This is a pretty satisfying piece of engineering. It's simple, durable, and basically an airtight trap for errant bits of fabric. It takes advantage of the fact that lint is made of the same stuff as air, namely nothing, so it falls out when the dryer stops running and the air inside the machine expands. But before we get to where it goes, let's take a moment to discuss where it comes from. It's not dirt. If you wore dirty clothes, you'd need to do a lot of pre-treating before putting them in the dryer. Even if you didn't, the outside world is full of grime and who knows what's under jeans. So why is your lint trap full of such pristine fluff? The answer is your clothes are falling apart and you aren't doing anything about it. See, clothes get snagged, they fray, they wear thin, they develop holes. If you wore these through, you'd notice. But if you put a whole outfit in a washing machine, well, that becomes a bit harder to spot. In fact, it becomes virtually impossible unless you can somehow make the entirety of your wardrobe vanish and reappear as a big pile of nothing. As your clothes are tumbled around with hundreds of others in the great industrial cauldron, the little holes become the little snags, which become the little pills, which become the little flakes that get sucked into the trap. Your new sweater that you wore once, the hole you didn't notice until it was too late, the frayed cuff that you never fixed because you couldn't be bothered. These are the casualties of time, of wear and tear, of thousands of micro tears and microscopic unravelings. Clothes were meant to last, but they don't, and you can't really do anything about it. So you just keep buying more. The modern age has its luxuries, but guaranteed quality isn't one of them. So in order to deal with this crisis of vanishing clothes, humanity invented the washing machine, which eventually led to the dryer, which in turn leads us back to our mountain of lint and the inevitable question, what now? Well, dumping it in the trash is depressingly obvious. You could try burning it, don't. It releases all sorts of nasty particles into your home. Plus it smells bad. You could spread it on some sort of dry cleaning press, maybe lay some heavy books on top and squeeze out the remaining juice, leaving you with a slightly less fluffy, but still substantial brick of compressed lint. But ultimately that's just delaying the inevitable, because lint is, above all else, a waste product. It's by definition hard to imagine a world where it had value, where people would purposefully create it, where they'd spend their money and resources to generate more. In fact, it took us centuries to even consider doing that. We learned to spin raw materials into yarn, then into cloth, then to cut and sew it into garments. All of these steps leave behind scraps, shavings, leftovers, things that can be gathered and reused. This is nothing new. It's been going on since humans started sewing, literally since we developed the wheel and the axe. But the invention of the dryer changed everything. It turned discarded scraps into a consistent, fluffy product that was almost certainly clean and definitely didn't contain any glass, metal, or other sharp objects. Almost. All of a sudden we had an extremely easy to gather raw material that could be funneled straight into whatever manufacturing process required fine, soft fibers. A lint-based utopia seemed assured. You only needed to look at patent records from the 50s and 60s to realize that practically every possible avenue had been considered. Lintcrete, the solution to the world's housing problems, contained 30% lint mixed with sawdust and clay. The theory was that the lint would bind the whole thing together, offering a cheap alternative to traditional bricks. Unfortunately, the theory didn't pan out. The resulting cinder block-like structure apparently crumbled and fractured rather easily. But that didn't stop further experiments, including the equally ill-conceived idea of making a lint log. These fuel starters relied on compressing lint into cylindrical shapes, either solid or hollow. One patent referred to them as the hardest fuel briquette known to man, the idea being that their high cellulose content would burn cleanly, producing coals suitable for both campfires and fireplaces. The patent even included helpful diagrams explaining how to properly light the logs, complete with a lit match and the desperate, hopeful caption, "Too large to explode." That escalated quickly. Another lucrative area was litter. After all, the principle behind cat litter is relatively straightforward. You want something cheap, absorbent, and easy to dispose of. While many early formulations contained actual asbestos, the risks of cancer hadn't been widely publicized yet, and for a brief moment, Lint was seen as a viable replacement. One enterprising inventor even came up with a training system for cats to switch from the sawdust and shale to a strictly lint diet. So you stand there surrounded by your new life's work, contemplating the meaning of existence, the futility of progress, the hollowness of modern life. Then you look down at your feet and realize you're standing in a literal mountain range, made of dirt and cat hair. Maybe you could compact the lint, solidify it, turn it into something resembling stone. And you're not the only one to think of this. The 1950s and 60s were a golden age of patenting, and many of those patents were for methods of compressing lint into various shapes and sizes. Bricks, tiles, panels, even cones. The thinking was that lint, when highly compressed, becomes strong and dense enough to replace any number of common products. One such example was lintolite, essentially a compressed lint panel that could be used as an insulator or sound deadener. The theory was that the thickness of the panel could be adjusted based on how much pressure was applied during compression. No word on how exactly that worked in practice, but the name alone is a masterpiece. But despite all this ingenuity, none of it caught on. The crush and compact method was technically successful, but it was also expensive, cumbersome, and ultimately produced fairly low-quality results. Furthermore, lint remained a free and abundant resource, so there was no real reason to turn it into something else. Throw it away. You know what happens when you try to recycle it. Nothing, literally nothing. Eventually, the lint begins to take over. It builds up in unexpected places. It clogs ducts. It gathers in odd corners. It accumulates in the vacuum cleaner itself, becoming a part of the house. The place starts to smell faintly of fabric softener, and the fuzz grows thicker, creeping up along baseboards, spilling out of cracks in the foundation, flowing like sand through the gaps and doors. The house slowly becomes a tomb, not of memories, but of nothing, of lint. The purifier turns into the prison, the furnace into the mausoleum, and the dusty, gray snow drifts deeper and deeper. Soon, the place is barely habitable. The air is thick, visibility is poor, and the constant static makes every step feel like walking across 1,000 balloon-strewn rooms. Everything is covered in lint. The chairs, the curtains, the windows, the walls. The whole house is a tomb made of memory, where every corner and crevice is stuffed with forgotten threads. It's the home of the recluse, the end game of hoarding, the fate of the collector. It's the kingdom of lint. So you close the door, breathe a sigh of relief, and for a moment savor the quiet. You may have unleashed a new force of nature, but it's not yours to worry about. It's the next owner's problem. You are done. Every day we make decisions about what is useful and what is not just about products and technology, but also about colors. A color like this one might seem perfectly ordinary, yet it could have been deliberately chosen, because if you zoom in, you see that this is not a photo of a greige wall, but of a folded blanket composed of thousands of individual threads, each dyed a subtle shade of gray. But even that doesn't tell the whole story, because those shades of gray are not naturally occurring. They're the result of dyeing. Each thread was once white, part of a new blanket bought by an unsuspecting customer. But over time, its fibers took on a warm tint of gold. And if you were living in England in the late 18th century, that would have seemed remarkable, perhaps magical, because there wasn't a dye that could turn white threads gold. It happened on its own. Over time, the lint and debris trapped in the loom during weaving oxidized, staining the otherwise pristine fabric with dull, muddy gold. It was a problem. People wanted their textiles to stay white. They did not want them to turn into a murky simulacrum of wealth. This was before bleaching powder was invented, before chlorine bleach, even before the discovery of synthetic dyes. If you wanted to keep your linens bright, you had to resort to complicated, expensive, and often dangerous chemical treatments. The gold sickness was economically disastrous for linen producers. If their fabric turned even faintly yellow, it lost value, became relegated to cheap, disposable items like napkins. In the most extreme cases, the tainted fabric was literally thrown in the trash, buried in landfills, left to rot. And as the years passed, something interesting happened. As the fabric decomposed, it started to reappear, first as flecks of gold in river water, then in clumps, then in massive patches. It was as though the earth itself was rejecting the artificial golden hue forced upon it, and spitting it back out. In every city, people noticed something unusual. Street sweepings, chamber pots, ashes, they were all glowing a faint gold in the sun. There was so much of it that street vendors started selling piles of dirt, calling them gold dust. It became a sensation. Everybody wanted to know where this miraculous new gold was coming from, and how they could get their hands on it. The answer, of course, was nobody really knew. Nobody had pinpointed exactly how the gold sickness happened or why it was suddenly reversing. Most people probably assumed it was some sort of divine providence. After all, it appeared in times of great hardship, when Britain was going broke and throwing away its most valuable resource. A seemingly bottomless source of gold appeared to replace it. For the first time in history, people could afford to literally throw money in the trash. It was a bizarre economic paradox. Some folks even started making clothes entirely out of this fake gold, sewing scraps of gold-sickened fabric into ostentatious garments and jewelry. But this, too, proved to be a dead end. It turned out that the gold couldn't be washed or bleached. It turned out that the gold sickened didn't take dyes well either. Soon, the gold craze faded away, leaving people with gold shoes and aprons and shawls that would soon start to fade and turn brown. Eventually, scientists uncovered the truth. They identified the organic acid responsible for the golden hue, figured out how to extract and synthesize it, and thus the lint gold rush was born. Starting in 1786, anyone with a dirty laundry pile could pan for gold. All you needed was a bucket, a bowl, and a bit of ingenuity. Start by boiling your dirty laundry with a caustic soda ash. Next, strain the water. Then add a bit of vinegar and let the mixture cool. Finally, you need to carefully scrape off the resultant crust, and now you have lint gold. By weight, this was a surprisingly good haul, anywhere from 2 to 20% of the starting material. Once you had your hands on this mysterious substance, you could sell it to middlemen who sold it to textile factories, who paid good money to keep their looms running smoothly. It was a new kind of mining. Instead of heading off to distant mines, you could pan for gold from the comfort of your kitchen. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Linen manufacturers hated the competition and tried to lobby lawmakers to keep the process a secret. But the more people learned about the chemistry behind the lint gold rush, the less secretive it became. Within decades, there were entire communities of lint miners. Farmers used their wives' discarded linen to produce extra income. Poor folks scoured chamber pots and gutters. Laundresses and innkeepers had access to an endless supply of dirty laundry. Even prisoners were put to work collecting the precious material. It was called picking lint. Prisoners were locked up for a week with a pile of old rags and told not to leave until they found the gold. The more lint gold you could produce, the higher your social standing. Cooks became chemists. Servants got extra privileges. Children were sent out to collect the purest, whitest laundry. Families would keep entire rooms stocked with rags just for gold mining. At its height, the lint gold rush was a multi-million-dollar enterprise employing tens of thousands of people. Entire machines were designed to automate the process, and some industrious souls went into the business of selling specially treated fabrics that would produce the biggest yields. Everything about the lint gold rush was geared towards maximum efficiency. It was a gold rush after all. Then everything changed. It turns out that the science behind the lint gold rush wasn't all that complicated. People discovered that the chemical responsible for the lucrative golden hue was actually picric acid, which is made when wool or linen fibers oxidize. It was already a common ingredient in dyeing textiles. Chemists realized that they could make a lot more money selling dyes than buying low-quality laundry and risking a bad yield. Meanwhile, industrialization and scientific advances made textiles easier and cheaper to produce. Farmers and laundresses were replaced by automated looms and steam-powered presses. Before long, picric acid could be manufactured in labs rather than mined from your bathtub. The price of lint gold dropped dramatically, and its reputation went with it. Picric was no longer a mysterious substance. It was dirt cheap, even toxic. Factories dumped it into rivers and soil, poisoning wildlife and crops. In the U.S., the final blow came in 1879, when the Civil War ended and freed the hundreds of thousands of enslaved people who had been picking lint for white families. Suddenly there was just too much lint gold and not enough buyers. It became worthless and stayed that way for decades. That moment of hesitation over the trash can, that faint, ghostly echo of the lint gold rush's failed promise, eventually gives way to a different kind of impulse. It's not about utility or profit anymore. It's about something far more strange and human. You're not looking at that ball of lint as potential fuel or insulation. You're looking at its color, its texture, the way it holds together in a soft, cohesive mass. You're rolling it between your thumb and forefinger, feeling its unique, felt-like quality. And a thought, absurd and delightful, flickers through your mind. It looks like a little cloud, a tiny, gray animal, a miniature version of something. This is the moment the artist is born, not in a grand studio, but in the hum of the laundry room. For when the world refuses to find a use for something, when it declares it utterly without value, that is the precise moment it becomes the perfect medium for art. This is the story of how the ultimate symbol of worthlessness was painstakingly collected, curated, and transformed into objects of baffling beauty and profound peculiarity. This is an old-fashioned typewriter key. It was probably made around 1935. It has a very nice weight behind it, and a faint patina of age and use. Let's go ahead and put that to one side. Here's a set of keys from a computer keyboard. You might notice a similarity of shape and feel. The weight is less, the plastic coating is thinner, but the overall effect is pretty much the same. Now set those aside too, and here's a lint roller. You might notice again a similarity of shape and feel. Of course, each object serves a different function and has a different material composition, but the similarities are uncanny nonetheless. We could pile more examples on top of this. Rubbish bins, coat hangers, sugar dispensers, corkscrews, pepper grinders. But you get the point. Over the last 100 years or so, many objects have gradually converged towards a similar form factor. But today I want to focus on the typewriter key, keyboard key/lint roller. Not because I think this convergence is anything other than an interesting design coincidence, but because it points to something kind of strange going on in our heads. You see, none of these objects are especially pleasant to the touch. The typewriter key is metal and the keyboard key is plastic. The lint roller is covered in sticky adhesive. None of them are particularly ergonomic, durable, beautiful, or useful. All three are, however, satisfying to spin and roll. This is obviously true of the keys, but the lint roller is designed specifically to maximize this sort of interaction. When you roll it across your clothes, it produces a certain sound and you get a particular visual feedback as the roller picks up and holds onto stray fibers. Both the keys and the lint roller are smooth to the touch, but they still produce enough friction to keep them from feeling slippery or uncontrollable. And both are light enough to spin without requiring much effort. They also both weigh enough to feel substantial. The sound they produce when spun is relatively rich and full, but without being unpleasantly loud, like a crunchy snack. The keys and the lint roller satisfy our desire for a gentle haptic experience and auditory feedback. But what that really means is that they exploit a particular weakness we all seem to have. In fact, you didn't even need to see these objects to know how they felt. Even knowing their names and seeing their shapes, you were already subconsciously reaching out for them, your fingers twitching in anticipation of the sensation they would produce. This isn't just some physiological response triggered by the sight of things you enjoy touching. It's a more intentional act. Your brain is basically tricking you into picking up these objects solely because of their form. It's like seeing a Rubik's Cube and needing to solve it, or seeing a pencil and wanting to write something. Except it's not a conscious desire to engage with these objects. Rather, it's a more primal, pre-verbal urge that you barely understand yourself. You aren't just looking at the lint trap. Your fingers are already moving, drawn by a force you don't quite understand. Now, as far as I can tell, this doesn't apply to lint in general. The lint trap is a specific mechanism that produces a very particular type of fluff. What matters is that it has been contained and compacted into a compact, easily manipulable sheet. The act of creation, of sculpting fuzzy animals or painstaking lint portraits is a conscious one. It requires intent, effort, a decision to transform the mundane. But the relationship between humans and lint runs far deeper than this artistic impulse. It taps into something primal, pre-verbal, almost autonomic. The most important part of the lint trap isn't the fluffy stuff inside. It's the act of taking it out. This isn't about art or utility. This is about the psychology of fuzz. So what is it about the lint trap that compels us in this way? Well, it helps to understand what lint actually is. Lint is almost always composed of fibers that come off clothing during the wash cycle. It's usually cotton, polyester, or a mix of both. These fibers are incredibly soft and flexible. Unlike sand or dirt, lint particles don't catch on one another. Each one moves independently and easily slips out of the grasp of the others. So the question becomes, what is it about this particular collection of super soft, free-moving fibers that we find so compelling? Well, the answer probably has to do with the amount of control we are able to exert over them. Take a handful of dry leaves or a clump of wet clay and try to mold it into a specific shape. You might get somewhere, but these materials aren't nearly as responsive as lint. You can take a tiny ball of lint and mold it, twist it, pull it, squeeze it, poke it, prod it, and it comes back to its original shape without breaking or tearing. You can stretch it thin like taffy and pinch it into a new form. And even if you do break or tear a fiber, it's no big deal. All you have to do is grab a bit of the surrounding fuzz and stick it back together. With lint, you can experiment, fail, adapt and repeat until you achieve your desired result. It's like modeling clay, except infinitely more forgiving. And that is an incredibly rare sensation. Most of the time when we interact with inanimate objects, we're dealing with rigid, unyielding matter. We push and pull, but the object doesn't care. It doesn't respond. It's like trying to shape a brick or carve a rock. Sometimes we manage to leave our mark, but most of the time the object remains impervious to our efforts. With lint, though, we get to be God. We can squish it, pummel it, scrunch it, and it simply responds, yielding to our will with every flex of our fingertips. And the more docile the material is, the more we can explore, experiment, and play. It's a limitless sandbox where the medium is always there for us to pick up, drop, and rework. And that's just the physical side of things. Psychologically speaking, there are two other big reasons why we love to fuss with lint. The first is the emotional payoff. See, lint is a byproduct, a waste product that's normally tossed away. But by rescuing it from the rubbish bin, we inject meaning into something that didn't previously exist. We give it a purpose, shape, and individual identity. It's like naming an animal or making friends with a pet. We take an otherwise insignificant thing and make it special. And that gives us a rush of pure, uncomplicated joy. I mean, think about it. How many of us stop to appreciate the lint trap while doing our laundry before the existence of TikTok? How many of us were aware of the sheer beauty of a pristine, undisturbed sheet of lint? Probably not many. Yet now we spend hours meticulously peeling, stretching, and squeezing that very same thing. Why? Because by doing so, we've imbued it with a significance that it never had before. We are creating art out of rubbish, and that feels good. The second big reason we love messing with lint is a bit harder to pin down, but it's definitely something along the lines of Zen meditation meets military surplus. You see, lint is an incredibly homogeneous material. Every individual particle looks and behaves the same way. It's uniform, consistent, and predictable. And when you combine that with the soft, gentle textures and sounds involved in manipulating lint, you end up with a super relaxing sensory experience. The motion is slow and deliberate. The colors are subtle and muted. The sounds are quiet and minimal. It's like watching paint dry, except instead of paint drying, you are actively engaged in shaping the fluff, pulling it into new forms and giving it new identities. It's an incredibly meditative experience that strips away all distractions and lets you focus on a single task. That is both strangely absorbing and deeply satisfying. You can lose yourself in the process and feel a sense of calm and clarity that's hard to find anywhere else. The truth is, we all struggle with restlessness and boredom in our lives. It's a common ailment of the modern age, and sometimes we look for distractions and entertainment, scrolling through social media feeds or binging the latest TV show. But sometimes the best antidote to boredom is right under our noses, or at least in our laundry baskets. All we have to do is reach in, grab a handful of lint, close our eyes and let our fingers do the work. The lint will be there patiently waiting, ready to be shaped, molded and reshaped into whatever forms our hearts desire. And in that moment of pure tactile concentration, we'll find a sense of peace and satisfaction that's impossible to fake. We'll be completely present in the task at hand, focused and engaged in a way that we haven't been in a long time. And when we finally open our eyes and look around, the world will seem a little brighter and sharper, the sounds and colors a little more vibrant. We'll feel refreshed and rejuvenated, ready to take on the rest of the day with a newfound sense of energy and enthusiasm. After all, who needs a vacation when you have a lint roller? We've seen the look on your faces. You've been reaching for that dial under the dryer, trying to figure out if you should clean the lint trap yet again, wondering if there's really a difference between normal and time dry. We know those looks. In fact, we're pretty sure we know why you're hesitating as well. Maybe you want to procrastinate a little bit longer because you know that the job needs to get done eventually. Maybe you're a little bit worried about what happens if you don't clean the lint trap. Or maybe you're just wondering what happens when you clean the lint trap. These are all valid questions and ones that we're going to answer today. But first, you might be surprised to hear that lint is actually a fairly recent innovation. Throughout history, people have always needed to clean themselves up before special occasions. Kings and queens would don fresh robes for ceremonies. Roman emperors might have donned carefully selected tunics for their chariot rides through the forum. But lint as we understand it today is a product of our modern age of mass manufacturing. See, for most of human history, clothing was either made by hand or with very small, specialized tools. But starting around the Industrial Revolution, large factories started pumping out standardized clothing items at scale, and with these factory lines came the mass adoption of synthetic textiles, especially cotton. Cotton is cheap, soft, absorbent, but it's also somewhat delicate. To keep the fabrics intact during processing, manufacturers found they needed to add extra steps to prevent the material from coming apart. That's where the lowly lint trap comes in. Originally called a carding machine, this device runs steel wires through rolls of material, scraping away any loose fibers. The remaining cloth is then passed through a series of rollers to align the fibers into a sheet. This makes the material stronger and less likely to fall apart in consumers' hands. The process didn't stick around though. Adding these steps was expensive and time-consuming. Today, many manufacturers skip the process altogether. Without those machines, however, those same fibers can come loose in washing machines, collecting in clumps, and creating that familiar lint you see in your dryer. In terms of the dryer itself, despite the name, it's a relatively new invention. Clothes dryers were invented twice, once in the 1800s and again in the 1920s. No one really used the first version because it ran on a coal or wood-burning stove. The second one, however, was powered by electricity, making it much more convenient. Dryers became widespread after World War II when households had more disposable income, and a growing number of women were working outside the home. Despite that popularity, though, the mechanism inside the machine is pretty simple. First, the dryer pulls ambient air into the drum and passes it through heating elements. From there, it blows that hot air back onto the clothes, removing moisture until they're dry. The only complicated part is the rotation mechanism, which tumbles the clothes so all sides get exposed to that hot air. But that simple combination of heat and mechanical action is all it takes. That means the lint trap, which is often positioned near the intake vent, is really just a handy way to remove unwanted debris before it clogs up the system. Manufacturers recommend checking it regularly, although exactly how often depends on several factors. For one thing, the type of material matters. If you're dealing with a lot of microfiber, fleece, towels, or anything with rough edges, you need to check and clean that lint trap frequently. Otherwise, those materials will produce more lint and debris, which can affect the dryer's performance. On top of that, the older a garment is, the more worn down the material gets. So even for the same type of fabric, a brand new sweater will produce less lint than one that's been washed several times. Finally, frequency depends on the dryer itself. Gas models tend to get hotter, meaning they need more frequent cleaning. Same goes for high-efficiency machines, since they use less hot water, forcing the machine to run longer. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but experts generally suggest checking the trap every 3 to 4 cycles. However, if you have an older machine, it probably needs more attention, so err on the side of caution and clean it before every cycle. Okay, now that you know how and why to clean that lint trap, let's talk about what happens if you don't. For one thing, your clothes won't dry as quickly. Lint acts as a blanket, insulating the clothes and preventing the heat from circulating. So the longer you go without cleaning the trap, the longer each cycle will take. Eventually, it could take more than one cycle to fully dry a load, a huge waste of energy and time. Second, the buildup of lint can cause overheating. As lint collects inside the dryer, it can block the airflow and make the heating element work harder. That produces excess heat, which can damage the dryer and pose a fire risk. Thirdly, lint can clog the exhaust ductwork outside the house. If you have gas appliances, they could stop working, and if you have electric appliances, you might start noticing that they take longer and longer to finish a cycle. Finally, failure to clean the lint trap can damage your clothes. Most dryers are self-cleaning, which sounds nice, but it's a bit of an exaggeration. All the machine does is run a slightly longer cycle with a few extra minutes of intense heat. At the end, it's intended to burn off any lingering fabric softener and reduce odors, but it's not enough to completely prevent bacteria growth, so you can expect dingy or smelly clothes if you neglect the lint trap. Ultimately, cleaning the lint trap is a quick, easy task that pays off in the long run. It saves energy, reduces fire risk, keeps clothes looking good, and prevents costly repairs. Those are all good reasons to wipe away those looks of confusion, uncertainty, and fear and replace them with a confident smile. When you master this skill, it'll pay dividends for years to come. However, if you want to keep learning more about your home, there's no better place to start than Brilliant. Whether you're interested in everyday appliances or grand scientific principles, Brilliant has a course for you. Their services break down big topics into bite-sized chunks, allowing you to learn complex concepts in just a few minutes. That means you can learn about everything from computer science to astrophysics, to everyday mechanics. And Brilliant covers everything from basics like gravity, to advanced concepts like differential equations. Each topic is presented in a fun, interactive format that lets you play around with the material rather than just passively absorb it. That includes true-to-life simulations like their mechanical engineering course, which walks you through real-world applications step by step. And the best part is that you can do it all from your phone, tablet, or browser. It's a perfect way to squeeze a little more learning into every day. And now, great moments in Lint, a brief history of the fluff we leave behind. In our increasingly mechanized world, the physical traces of everyday life feel precious, ephemeral, almost alien. In a world where AI companions tell us what to wear, how to eat, and how to live, we cling to little pieces of lived experience. When you run your hand across the carpet and pull it away slowly, watching your skin cells and pet hair come along for the ride, that's intimacy. That's life lived. We trace our fingers over old photographs and feel closer to the past. These are the moments of connection we crave. Few objects capture this idea better than lint. That humble accumulation of fibers we find in our pockets or stuck to our clothing is a physical representation of our own bodies. Bits of ourselves left behind in our wake. Evidence of life lived. It's also, of course, a minor pain in the ass. For decades, lint has been the bane of the household, a nuisance to be dealt with in those little traps we empty without a second thought. But the stuff has a long history, both practical and surprisingly philosophical. The earliest record of lint as a problem dates back to the Industrial Revolution, specifically to those machines invented by Edmund Custis and James Hargreaves, that turned the production of textiles from a cottage industry to a mechanized process. Suddenly, textile factories were churning out goods by the yard and the world was full of new lint. The word itself entered the English language in 1764, originating in the Old English word lint, meaning to smear, a definition that still holds true today. But before lint was a factory hazard, it was a valuable resource. In fact, lint has been used as a material in its own right since the Middle Ages, when linen rags were cleaned and processed for reuse. Ragmen went door to door collecting cast-off linens and old clothing, which they sorted, beat, boiled, and sold as second-hand materials. This was a critical part of the economy, one that helped keep people out of poverty and the most basic of resources, circulating through society. In many ways, lint predates modern waste. It's a material born of scarcity and ingenuity, a reflection of societies that understood how to make the most of what they had. As such, it should come as no surprise that the earliest stories of lint don't come from industrialists lamenting a new factory hazard or consumers complaining about sticky clothes, but from the ragmen themselves. In 1850, an estimated 10,000 ragmen roamed the streets of London, gathering up discarded fabric and clothing. They were essential to a city that was rapidly industrializing and becoming wealthier, but also essential to the poor who depended on the money they made. Rags provided work, sustenance, and community for London's working class and lent dignity to a life that had become increasingly dehumanized. The very definition of thrift, these collectors knew every piece of lint by heart. It was only when mass production lowered prices and flooded the market with cheap, disposable clothing that the ragmen lost relevance. Once the old system of making do and mending was supplanted by the concept of planned obsolescence, once something was no longer repairable or easily recycled, it was discarded, thrown away. Today, we think of disposal as the norm, something so ingrained in our daily lives that we hardly notice. But this is a recent development in the grand scheme of things. For most of human history, nothing was simply thrown away. Everything was either reused, repurposed, repaired, or recycled. The notion that an item could be beyond repair, that it didn't deserve to be fixed or cleaned up, is a mindset shift that came with the advent of disposable income. In 1928, two-thirds of U.S. households had a washing machine, and with them, the leisure time to go shopping and buy replacements for broken items. By 1940, 80% of American families had cars that could be traded in for newer models. The concept of throwing something away because it was old or worn out was becoming commonplace. By the end of the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had taken its toll on the world. Cities were dirty and overcrowded, children worked in dangerous conditions, and air and water pollution were growing problems. The Victorian era coined the term the Age of Progress. And yet progress seemed to be taking humanity backwards. Something new called social responsibility was needed to address these problems. In 1889, the Children's Aid Society published a pamphlet titled 10 Years Progress and Present Work, which included this drawing of a dust-covered child whose raggedy clothes and bare feet hinted at a harsh life. The Victorian ideal of childhood innocence was challenged by the realities of living in poverty. The stark image highlighted the plight of these children and the need for change. As the world got dirtier and more crowded, the concept of cleanliness became a selling point. Soap makers like Lever Brothers created products that promised not just cleanliness, but also purity. Their product, Sunlight Soap, was advertised as pure and powerful enough to clean not just clothes, but babies. One advertisement showed a baby being bathed in Sunlight Soap, suggesting that it was gentle enough for even the most delicate of skins. Another featured a mother scrubbing her children with a bar of soap, emphasizing the importance of cleanliness in a home. The invention of laundry detergent and the automatic washing machine in the early 20th century changed the way clothes were cleaned. No longer did clothes need to be scrubbed by hand. Instead, they could be tossed into a machine with powder and water and come out sparkling clean. This innovation not only saved time, but also presented a new opportunity for companies to profit from a necessity. But this revolution came at a cost. The convenience of modern cleaning products and appliances led to a different kind of waste, the waste of resources. As people began to buy more and more of these products, the amount of wastewater and chemical waste generated increased as well. The very things designed to make life easier and homes cleaner were contributing to a different kind of mess. While social reformers addressed the problems of poverty and child labor, the concept of waste became a new frontier. Manufacturers started to incorporate recycling into their processes, reducing their reliance on virgin materials. For example, aluminum companies began to purchase used aluminum cans, recycle them, and use them to produce new cans. This not only reduced the amount of waste going to landfills, but also saved on costs and resources. Consumer habits were also influenced by environmental concerns. The popularity of reusable bags, for instance, grew significantly in the early 21st century as people became more aware of the impact of plastic on the environment. People started to see the consequences of excessive consumption and waste firsthand. The images of overflowing landfills and polluted oceans became a stark reminder of what not to do. This feeling of urgency gave rise to a new generation of entrepreneurs who saw an opportunity to solve a growing problem. Companies began to spring up offering innovative solutions to waste management. Some focused on reducing packaging, while others developed biodegradable plastics. There was even a push to use recycled materials in construction. Today, as we stand on the brink of an even bigger challenge, the transition to a circular economy, the idea of waste is more relevant than ever. The linear model of take, make, and dispose is being challenged by the need for sustainability and resource efficiency. The quest to move away from landfills towards a circular economy is reshaping industries. From fashion to food, the principles of reduce, reuse, and recycle are no longer just buzzwords. They're a necessity. Fashion brands are exploring ways to reuse materials. Food companies are reducing packaging, and governments are investing in recycling infrastructure. The once simple act of throwing something away is now a decision that carries weight. Every piece of lint, every scrap of fabric, every bit of waste is seen as a potential resource waiting to be reclaimed. Today, lint is everywhere, literally. It's trapped in our filters, embedded in our clothing, clinging to our furniture. It's a constant reminder of our consumption and our carelessness. But it's also a resource, a raw material waiting to be reused. In an era where sustainability is no longer an option, it's a necessity. We're learning to see lint not as waste, but as a valuable resource. It's a testament to the ingenuity of our time, a reminder of the challenges we face and a symbol of the solutions we're creating. The future of lint is not in the trash, but in the possibilities it holds. Imagine for a moment that you're an art thief. Your target, a wealthy patron's home. Among the valuables inside, a massive sculpture made entirely of lint. It's an oddity, sure, but hardly worth risking your whole career over. Yet you do it anyway. You lug the unwieldy mass of gray fuzz out of the house, down the street, into the getaway car. Then something happens. Maybe it's the texture. Maybe it's the sheer bulk of your prize. But as you hold it, you realize you want it back. Not because you really cared about the sculpture itself, but because of what getting caught with it would mean. You may have actually just given yourself up to the police. Confused? Well, let me explain. In the world of forensic science, not all evidence comes in hard, undeniable forms like fingerprints or DNA. Sometimes the most telling clues are the seemingly innocuous things left behind in the heat of the moment. Things like lint. Yep, that omnipresent collection of stray fibers, dust and bits of fabric that gathers in our dryers and litters our favorite surfaces. Lint, one of the most abundant materials in the world, found in every home, office, classroom, and couch you've ever sat on. But despite its ubiquity, until recently, lint hadn't really played much of a role in criminal investigations. And the reason for that is pretty simple. To use lint as forensic evidence requires a level of analysis and cataloging that simply did not exist even a few decades ago. For the longest time, lint was considered too homogeneous, too hard to distinguish from other lint. But today, thanks to advancements in microscopy and spectroscopy, what once seemed like a fuzzy blob can now be analyzed as a rich source of information, revealing details about where a person was, what they wore, even how they clean their house. The question is, how does a material so ubiquitous become meaningful in a court of law? What does it say about us that a scrap of lint could condemn a man to prison for life? And why should you care? Because it turns out that lint can reveal way more about you than you think. Our mainstream historical fact here is a landmark case that changed forensic science forever. The Atlanta child murders of the late 1970s and early 1980s. Over a period of 2 years, 29 African American children and young adults were killed in Atlanta. The investigation was a massive, high-pressure, high-profile ordeal, and it was a long time before any arrests were made. But when they were, it was thanks in part to one of the most minute pieces of forensic evidence imaginable. In addition to fibers recovered from the bodies themselves, investigators began combing through people's closets, searching for anything that could link a suspect to the victims. Suspect no. 1. Wayne Williams was a convicted child molester who fit some of the witnesses' descriptions of the killer. But the problem was, he had an airtight alibi for most of the murders. Still, the police decided to dust his house for fingerprints, and while they didn't find any, they did find something else. As it turned out, several victims had been carrying a rare kind of yellow-green nylon fiber in their hair or clothing, and that fiber was identical to the kind used in the carpeting of Williams' home and his station wagon. Now, it should be noted that by this point, forensic fiber analysis wasn't exactly a standard procedure. Experts from the FBI testified that while they couldn't say the fiber was absolutely unique to Williams, it was incredibly rare. Only a small percentage of people owned yellow-green nylon carpeting, and even fewer used that exact kind in both their house and their car. It was a good enough lead to go on, and it ultimately led to Williams' conviction in 1982. He's still in prison today. This case catapulted fiber evidence into the public consciousness and established a rigorous protocol for its analysis, turning every speck of dust at a crime scene into a potential treasure trove of information. Your carpet was no longer just a floor covering, it was a silent snitch, constantly shedding evidence of your presence. Now for the quirkier, more obscure tidbit from the annals of forensic lint. Long before gas chromatography and mass spectrometers, there were the Victorians, and they had their own, far more macabre relationship with evidential fluff. One of the earliest documented uses of fiber analysis in a court of law involved a simple case of theft in 19th century London. A shopkeeper accused a woman of stealing a bolt of distinctive, violet-dyed wool cloth. She denied it. The constable, in a moment of inspiration, didn't search her bags. He asked to see her baby, which she was clutching. The child's clothes were, of course, covered in a fine layer of lint. The constable carefully collected this lint and, under a simple microscope, compared it to fibers from the stolen bolt. Interwoven with the common white cotton of the baby's clothes were unmistakable violet wool fibers. It was a match, the woman confessed. This rudimentary analysis essentially, "Your lint looks like the thing you stole," was a revolution in its day. It established that we leave a constant, fuzzy trail behind us, a trail that can cling to the most innocent of carriers, like a sleeping child. Historians and legal scholars still argue whether the sheer volume of synthetic fibers in our modern environment has now made fiber evidence less reliable, or at least more difficult to interpret. In the 1970s, a rare yellow-green nylon fiber was a compelling clue. Today, with fast fashion and global manufacturing, a fiber might be so common that its presence proves nothing more than that a person exists in the modern world. The debate hinges on the concept of evidence versus coincidence. Is finding a common blue polyester fiber on a victim proof of contact with a suspect's jacket? Or is it just proof that the victim walked through a mall? The very ubiquity of lint, the thing that makes it so forensically valuable in theory, might be its Achilles heel in practice, drowning out strong, rare signals with a constant, background static of meaningless fuzz. So you, in your home with its carpets and clothes and upholstery, you are living in a constant state of evidence shedding. You are a walking, talking lint factory, and every step you take, every time you sit down, you leave a little bit of yourself behind. That faint film of dust on your TV isn't just dust. It's a composite sketch of your lifestyle written in microscopic fibers. The cat hair on your black pants isn't just a nuisance. It's a biological tag linking you directly to your pet. The very concept of privacy takes on a new, unsettling dimension when you realize your very identity is sloughing off you like a second skin, collecting in the corners of rooms and the footwells of cars, waiting for someone with a tape lift and a powerful microscope to come along and read your story. That ball of lint you toss from the dryer isn't just waste. It's a condensed, discarded chapter of your life, a tiny, felted biography that, in the right hands, could tell someone everything about what you wear, where you've been, and who you are. It's a humbling and slightly terrifying thought that the most insignificant thing about you might also be the thing that gives you away. Now, while lint might not land you in jail, it can help keep you there. A prisoner serving time for murder in Ohio named Michael Madison earned himself another 32 years when his cellmate, Gregory McLeod, accused him of killing for women. Police were skeptical but intrigued enough to bring in Madison for questioning. They had no physical evidence linking him to the crimes. Madison had an alibi for 3 of them, and he passed a polygraph test. But when they searched his prison cell, they found a scrap of carpet, about 2 centimeters square, with some pink fibers adhering to it. These fibers were later identified as an unusual blend of rayon and nylon that came from only one place, the apartment where one of the murdered women had lived. And that wasn't the only bit of evidence they found. The police had also noticed Madison had suspiciously frequent visits from women, including one who was never seen leaving his apartment. When they searched the apartment, they found more scraps of carpet and even a showbox containing a collection of women's underwear, some of which matched the victims. All told, the evidence was enough to convince a jury to convict Madison. He's currently serving out his sentence in the same Ohio State Penitentiary where he met McLeod. The 2 men are no longer cellmates, but if they happen to pass each other in the hallway, they might exchange a grateful nod. Thanks to that minuscule piece of rayon nylon carpet, McLeod is now a free man. When it comes to lint, then, it's important to remember that while it's impossible to draw conclusions from a single thread, the bigger the picture you can build, the clearer the message becomes. So here's to hoping you don't have any particularly interesting stories to tell. Now check out Do You Have Superpowers? Or watch this video instead. You are watching television. Your favorite show is drawing to a close, but instead of focusing on the flickering images, you are transfixed by something else entirely, something odd and unexpected. On the screen, 2 bumbling thieves have just stolen a priceless work of art. Only it isn't a painting or a sculpture. It's a giant ball of lint. You can't help but laugh. It's silly, absurd, almost comical. But then the screen fades to black and the scene shifts. The image of the rolling laundry basket disappears, replaced by a stark, sterile hallway. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. You're no longer in a whimsical, quirky art gallery. You're inside a cold, unfeeling forensic lab. No longer a laughing matter. The fate of an entire murder investigation now rests upon that ball of lint. You feel a sudden jolt of anxiety. What? How? Balls of lint aren't valuable. They're disposable, generic, gray, worthless wads of worthless material. Or are they? Suddenly you're being pulled into a disconcerting new perspective. Those seemingly meaningless balls of fluff clinging to your socks or gathering in your dryer aren't just junk. They're silent witnesses, ghostly archives of your existence. Every time you run your hand across a fabric surface, you leave behind a tiny, invisible calling card, a whisper of your DNA encoded in the structure of countless microscopic fibers. Now you're being shown around this forensic lab. Everything is pristine, organized, clinical. Rows upon rows of glass vials containing tiny samples of lint from crime scenes stand like silent sentries. Microscopes, so precise they can discern the intricate structure of a single thread, hum softly in the background. Your eyes are drawn to a display case filled with what looks like a jumble of threads and scraps. But upon closer inspection, you see they're not random. Each one has been carefully labeled and categorized, placed there as a reminder of the power hidden within these humble objects. And then you meet the people behind all this, a group of forensic scientists, their faces illuminated by the glow of their computer screens, their eyes sharp, focused, intense. They speak a language that's both technical and alien to you, Words like birefringence, trillable, crimp, alluding to the minute details they dissect to extract meaning from otherwise insignificant balls of lint. They look up, catching your gaze. For a moment, you see a reflection of yourself in their eyes, a curiosity tinged with caution. They're not sure if you understand, but you sense they're trying to show you that lint is no longer just lint. It's a key to understanding who you are, where you've been, and perhaps where you're going. But before they can fully unveil the secrets held within those tangled masses, you have to understand one crucial thing about lint. It's not a singular thing, not a uniform substance. It's a chaotic collection of disparate fibers, each with its own story, its own journey to get tangled up in the mess. To truly decipher the meaning held within the lint, you need to understand the stories of the threads themselves. You find yourself transported back in time, to a distant field where flax plants grow tall and strong. Farmers harvest the tall stalks, strip them of their leaves, and expose the precious bundles of flax fibers hidden within. These fibers will become linen, a fabric prized for its strength and durability. But for now, they're raw, unprocessed, and incredibly fragile. Next, you're in a bustling cotton field. The air is warm, heavy with humidity, and nimble fingers swiftly pluck the fluffy bolls from their pods, revealing the softest, most versatile of fibers. These fibers will eventually transform into clothing, towels, blankets, but for now, they're just cotton, pure and simple. Then you're amidst towering bamboo groves. The wind rustles the leaves, and from these slender stalks, a unique fiber is extracted. Bamboo fiber, valued for its softness and natural antibacterial properties, awaits its turn to be woven into fabrics. You're witnessing the beginnings of different fibers, each born from different plants, nurtured, harvested, and prepared in unique ways. Each fiber carries its origin story within its very core. These journeys, though diverse, have one common purpose: to transform raw materials into the building blocks of fabrics, each distinct, each holding the essence of its source. But these fibers won't stay pure for long. Their paths converge as they're blended, twisted, woven together, creating a complex tapestry of mixed fibers. The once distinct individuals are now united in a common purpose, forming a cohesive whole. Your journey culminates in a modern textile factory. The air hums with the energy of machines weaving, knitting, creating textiles from the diverse range of fibers. As the machinery operates, fibers are stretched, compressed, dyed, transforming into the familiar fabrics that form the backdrop of your daily life. The fusion of different fibers results in a vast array of textures, colors, and patterns, ready to be fashioned into clothing, furniture, or any number of household items. From farm fields to factory floors, you've traced the lineage of common fibers, understanding that each strand carries with it a unique history, a testament to the labor, innovation, and artistry that goes into their creation. As you return to the forensic lab, you bring this knowledge with you. Suddenly, a simple ball of lint is no longer just a jumble of threads. It's a complex ecosystem, a microcosm of your life experiences condensed into a tiny, fuzzy ball. Each fiber tells a story, and together they form a narrative of your existence. In a world where everything seems to disappear into the ether, leaving no trace, lint offers a tangible connection to the intangible moments that make up your life. As you watch the TV screen, a dramatic scene unfolds. Two figures are engaged in a tense game of cat and mouse. Every step, every move is fraught with tension, each interaction leaving behind an invisible residue of contact. The detective, sharp, observant, knows how to read the signs. He understands that the criminal has inadvertently left behind a calling card, a silent witness to the crime, and it's not what you think. It's not fingerprints or DNA, it's lint. In this high-stakes game, lint becomes the ultimate forensic tool. It silently reveals the secrets of the past, shedding light on the truth. Under the microscope, lint transforms into a story. Each fiber narrates a part of the journey, offering clues that lead investigators closer to the heart of the mystery. And as the investigation deepens, the true value of lint is revealed. It's not just a byproduct of daily life. It's a repository of memories, a physical manifestation of experiences, a silent storyteller. The final scene arrives. The detective confronts the perpetrator, armed with the evidence gleaned from the lint, piecing together the events of the crime. The confrontation reaches a climax, and suddenly, the stolen artifact from the beginning, the giant ball of lint, reappears. It stands as a symbol of the transformation that's taken place. The shift from a trivial object to an irrefutable piece of evidence. The absurdity of the situation is underscored, highlighting the power lint holds in unraveling the complexities of human interaction. Ray left contemplating the nature of evidence, and the significance of the most overlooked aspects of daily life. Lint, once dismissed as insignificant, has proven crucial in solving the case. Its ability to reveal hidden truths shatters the notion that the smallest things hold no importance. In the grand scheme of things, lint, despite its seeming worthlessness, emerges as a valuable asset in the pursuit of justice. And finally, you find yourself standing in your own living room. The walls seem a bit closer, the furniture strangely piled. You notice, for the first time, the lint accumulating on your sofa, the dust bunnies under the rug, the fibers clinging to your clothes. The world around you is no longer mundane. It's a landscape rich with stories waiting to be uncovered. You are surrounded by a silent chorus of witnesses, each piece of lint whispering tales of your daily life, travels, and encounters. You realize that the life you live, the experiences you cherish, and the stories you tell are all etched into these tiny threads, forming a tangible record of your existence. You are not alone in your space. You are enveloped by the echoes of your life, captured in lint. The realization is both humbling and profound. In the grand tapestry of existence, each fragment of lint is a stitch, holding together the complex design of your life. When you open your dryer, there is a brief window of opportunity, a few seconds between pulling the door open and letting the tumbling vortex suck your sanity, and 12 socks straight into its impossible depths. In that small window, you catch a glimpse of the lint screen, a metal frame crisscrossed with fine mesh, an unassuming slab until you remove the light blue barrier protecting it. And then you see the fluff, a gray, gummy substance, often dry, sometimes damp, and in moments of high drama, alarmingly wet, clinging together in a soggy clump that looks distressingly like a bit of boggy corpse. This half-digested conglomeration of fibers, oils, skin, and God knows what else is what you spend your precious few seconds considering, before surrendering to the automatic or manual suction of the laundry abyss. But what you are really looking at is the evidence of the ultimate futility of human effort. You are staring directly into the void where endless trillions of attempts to make, wear, shape, alter, express yourself through clothing ultimately end up. It is the crushing conclusion of everything you did, everything you paid for, every deliberate choice about fit and texture and color, reduced to this moist lump. You don't have to think about what happens next because the universe has already thought for you. With a push of a button, the mechanical jaws of fate grind the lint into a finer powder and spew it back into the outside world. That light blue door hides the heart of a well-oiled murder machine that pulverizes any dignity you might have clung to along with the actual fibers of your clothing. All you can do is eject the tray, hold a wet, sandy mass, and wonder how things got to this point. A question as old as cloth itself. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had only one fabric: animal skins. Wearing fur or hide was a necessity, a competition against exposure, a compromise with living things to stay alive. But animals have a habit of dying and decaying, which meant your protection was always slowly rotting away. You patched and mended to extend the life of your clothing, but eventually a worn hide becomes trash. If you were lucky, you lived near flowing water and a sharp rock to beat your rags against. You work out a ritual of scraping and scrubbing, the oldest recorded technique for cleaning going back at least as far as ancient Mesopotamia. But even against a rock, something gets lost. The friction of the beating breaks off the fluffiest bits of the hide, tiny flakes of fiber and grease that float around you like pollen and settle on the ground as lint. The first humans to experiment with plant fibers quickly found the same thing. Linen, hemp, cotton, bamboo, reeds, all the plant-based fabrics we used had the same flaw. Each wash wore them down a little more, sending wisps of cloth fluttering to the ground. But throughout human history, there have always been clever people who turned problems into solutions. Someone, somewhere figured out that the thin, smooth surface of a flat rock was better at smoothing cloth than a rough, uneven one. A step toward the washboard. Someone else probably noticed that rubbing against a stone loosened dirt and spread the oil, a key part of the process lost in modern washing machines. Someone else may have seen a rounded stone and thought, why not turn it into a ball? And thus the washing ball was born. Small objects inside a sack rubbed against the dirty clothes, helping to work out stains and spread oils. But whatever the method, the result was the same. Every slap, every scrape, every scrub generated the same insidious enemy, lint. It clung to walls, floated through windows, piled up on sills, fell like snow through cracks in floors, soaked into the walls themselves, becoming part of the very structure of homes. By the Middle Ages, the perpetual lint snowfall had become a problem. Churches, town halls, castles, palaces, all the structures, that had survived fires and floods and war suddenly had to contend with a new foe. A soft, gritty sludge that eroded the mortar-choked gutters, clogged drains, fouled the air, and bred disease. The cure was simple enough: a man with a brush sweeping the streets, raking roofs, gathering the ubiquitous lint and keeping the city healthy. But it was costly and difficult and couldn't cover all surfaces. To solve the new grime, cities had to invent a new job: the lint scavenger. These desperate measures reveal how lint, in its quiet, invisible way, was changing the world. It was a threat to public health, an economic burden, an inescapable fact of daily life. Then came a twist in the tale. As late as the mid-19th century, lint was almost entirely a benign annoyance. Most clothes were made from linen and wool, both highly durable and low-shedding. But industrialization changed everything. Suddenly there were fabrics stronger and cheaper than anything handmade, namely cotton, then rayon, nylon and polyester, materials engineered to withstand the brutal test of modern life, but prone to grinding themselves down into microplastics. They became part of our everyday lives and our everyday pollution. As recent as the 1960s, it was hard to imagine that this would change. Advances in fabric technology seemed to happen in fits and starts, and it was easy to assume that the great shedding would continue indefinitely. Everything had a shelf life, and that included clothes. But today, scientists and innovators are fighting back against the relentless march of shedding. After decades of research, we are close to producing truly biodegradable plastics that won't stick around in the environment for centuries. Companies like Adidas are working on shoes made of fused plastic waste that naturally degrade after 2 years. A University of California Berkeley grad student has developed a mesh filter that efficiently filters out microplastics from seawater. The U.S. Navy has introduced a new uniform designed to prevent sailors from shedding 40 pounds of clothes-related debris each year. And the European Union has funded an enormous project to map where microplastics are traveling around the world so we can hopefully shut off the taps. But this is all like fixing a dam while the ocean's rising. For a real solution, we need to do what we do best: innovate. This is the era of self-cleaning clothes, of fabrics engineered not to shed at all, of washers that don't just collect lint, but somehow stop it from forming in the first place. Companies like Outland Denim have developed jeans that use a laser-powered system to fuse their threads more effectively, reducing pilling and extending a garment's life for years. But the most intriguing ideas are on the fringes. From centrifuges that fling lint right back onto your clothes, redistributing oils instead of dumping them into the environment, to X-ray machines that scan garments for weak spots and send repair alerts directly to your phone. Companies are starting to compete over who can offer the most durable, long-lasting, self-repairing products. So you are holding a lump of lint and you are full of hope. You stand at the precipice of a new age of engineering where we learn from the mistakes of the past, where science and manufacturing conspire to build quality into the very essence of your belongings. You will buy fewer things that shed less, lose nothing, and waste nothing. But you are also holding a mystery. You can't know what fibers are trapped in this lump. Maybe it is mostly polyester and nylon, destined to pollute the world for generations. Maybe it is mostly cotton, shedding as much as it ever did. Maybe there is a shred of that first great shedding, some mammoth hair, a ghost from the dawn of clothing. Whatever the case, the future of lint is up to you. You have the power to shape the next stage of this strange, fluffy history. The choices you make about what you buy, how you care for your clothes, how you mend them, how you recycle them, all of that is up to you. Maybe the great shedding isn't ending. Maybe it is accelerating. The future of lint is unwritten. It is waiting for you to decide what sort of mark you want to leave on the world, what sorts of ghosts you want to leave for the future. It is a big decision. Don't let it slip away in a moment of distracted tossing.